Hello everybody, this is Mark here at Gary's Guitars in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and it's time for another edition of our Little Amp series. And I would like you to say hello to my little friend, the Gretsch Electromatic. It is beautiful in most every way, including sounding. Electromatic is a name that Gretsch uses on a lot of things. This was their original guitar amplifier. It's a 5-watt amplifier, and today we call that low watt. But here's something interesting that Gary would say to customers when every once in a while someone would come in and go like, "Hey, my Strat's buzzing." It's like, "Yeah, your Strat's buzzing. Strat's buzz." They go, "Oh, no, I mean this is something different." And then they plug in their Strat, and it's just regular Strat buzz. But if you're playing a Strat through a Marshall stack that's 100 watts with tons of gain, that buzz is going to be crazy. But when these amplifiers were invented and single coil pickups were the way of the world, it's a 5-watt amp. It's not loud enough to create enough buzz to bother you. So this was not necessarily a quiet amp, this was a normal amp back then. To make the loudest guitar amps, we'd say probably Fender got started with that in the 60s. But in the 50s, you just had this amp and you turned it up. And turned up, it makes a horrifically wonderful sound. It does distort turned up for sure. But that's the way things happened back then. So, we're going to talk about it some more and show it to you a bit. So, let's have a look. So here it is. It's tweed. What appears to have been lacquered tweed with the lacquer coming off. Leather handle that's almost falling off. This piping here is beautiful. Gretsch always had an eye for design, for sure. And the modern, Gretches also pay tribute to that design often. This is a Electromatic, which is a name they still use today, and that Gretsch logo that they still use today. So definitely quite beautiful, especially with this little plate down here in the rear. The Fred Gretsch Company, manufacturing company, Brooklyn and Chicago. So, power switch, volume and tone. The tone is basically, kind of an absence of high end until you put it all the way up, and then you kind of get a normal sound. The volume, increases the volume up to about halfway, like these often do, and then it's just how much more distortion do you get, especially if you're plugging a modern guitar amplifier into this. 2 instrument inputs and a microphone input. The instrument inputs, having many inputs is just kind of like a marketing thing. More than several people can plug in at the same time. So I have a vague memory of the microphone on this not being controlled by the volume here. It's just kind of like a direct. So if we look inside, we got one preamp tube with 6 SL7, and then a power tube is a 6 V6, and behind there's a rectifier tube. This is the multi-section cap can. This is the power transformer, and the output transformer is inside or hidden down there somewhere. The speaker, we can't quite see it unless we appears to be a speaker of the day for sure. Kind of a large magnet for something of its time, although it does distort just fine. Kind of like a twin. A champ. I hate to say it so much because every little amp gets compared to the champ. Something like a very early champ about this, especially, and this is the most important thing here, and we're talking about what's the distinct sound of this amp, is the 6 SL7 preamp tube. 6 SL7 is an octal. It fits into the same slot as this octal power tube. So it's not the 12X7 for sure. It's a predecessor to 12X7. Sound-wise, it gives you that warmer sound. The 12X7 is a little more hi-fi, a little more full range, and more gain for sure. This is going to give you less gain. They're so similar, in fact, as far as what they can be swapped into each other's with an adapter. You can swap them into each other's sockets. But this is the same tube that's found in the very early Fenders, including the Champ, but also those Bassmen that people love so much. The 12x7 is supposed to be a longer life tube, but they last just fine. The 12x7 is kind of a standard of today, so sometimes it's nice to have an amp that has something a little different. But that's the major contributor to what makes this unique in its sound compared to other 5-watt amps. Is that tube. It's hardy enough to, you've often seen, well, perhaps you have seen videos from films of the 50s where people are playing through amps this size, and they're getting away with it. So 5 watts is a lot sometimes if you turn it all the way up, and depends on what your needs are. And I was speaking about this earlier, the reason the 5-watt amps have become so much more popular is people, the loud, blisteringly loud music era might be over. People want quieter music, and also PAs are so good that you can always put a microphone in front of your amp if you have to. At the time, that until recently, that was not the case. So I'll address this again. I'm not going to plug this amp in right now to play it for you. There's other people on YouTube who have made on their phone or on their camera microphone videos of this amp sound, which doesn't quite do it justice. And why do I want to do the same thing? I suspect that someday I may take some of these little amps into the studio, maybe do a finale to this series, and just show you studio quality sound of the little amps so you can really hear. But for right now, I'm just going to be talking about the sound, and I know talking about sound. But these are crazy expensive these days. You see people asking thousands of dollars for them. Are they worth it, is the big question. And I would have to say in this case, probably not. Not unless this sound is like the key to your... Not unless you just have way too much money sitting around. They'll probably continue to appreciate. They didn't make a lot of them, and there's some getting thrown away every day, and so scarcity is a lot of what adds to value. But also, it would really have to be a linchpin of your sound, this one particular amp doing its honking sound, because they are considerably expensive, and compared to, they're essentially Tweed Twin money, and they're Tweed Champ money, and they're a Tweed Champ look, Tweed Champ sound, in that also these amps were literally handmade, and especially when we talk about the Fender ones, but I'm not sure, because I've only heard one of these, and this is the one, and the dude in Japan on YouTube showing playing through one. And they tend to be different from each other radically. They tend to change from design from year to year, but nothing else other than the design. So that this amp looks like 5 years before it and 5 years after it. Maybe it's a chassis that they design they kept for years. You'll see an earlier one, the branded Electromatic, and like I said, they to this day they still call things Electromatic. So yeah, is it worth it is the question. You might be watching this from the future, so leave a comment and let me know, was it worth it if you bought one of these and sat on it or played it. The problem with playing a vintage amp this old and this valuable is you will, as it appreciates in value, you will decrease its value, because by being used, you'll have wear, and that wear will bring down the value if you have to change the tubes, for example, or you have to change the speaker because you just got too excited one night and really laid into it. If I had something this rare and strange, I might just change the speaker right away and put the speaker away somewhere and just say, like, well, this is for someone else's vintage value later down the line, but I need something that's practical to play. And I mentioned this when I talked about my Champs. I swapped the speakers. to a modern speaker. Modern speakers sound great. You can get a variety of different different speakers with different, slightly different nuances to them. There's a lot of talk. A lot of people can talk about what they like and don't. So you really do get to, by swapping the speaker out on one of these amps and keeping the old one, you get to experience a lot of a total improvement, a gain improvement sometimes, because, and I think I've spoken, you may or may not have seen me say this before, there's 4 places where distortion happens. I think I made a video about it. You can go look for it. You have your preamp distortion, your power amp stage distortion, your output transformer distortion, and your speaker distortion. All of these things can malfunction in a way that gives you what we call distortion, and sometimes they all do, and that's kind of cool too. Conclusions on this: if you got one, keep it, hang on to it. It sounds great. Does it sound as great as it costs? That's one for the ages, not for me to answer. But if you can get your hands on one. Speaking about this amp and amps like it, there is nothing on this amp that can't be repaired. So if you find one that doesn't work, it might be worth getting if you can get it cheaply and repair it, because it uses basic parts. Capacitors, resistors, transformers, they all exist today. It's a lot easier to make a transformer these days. It's a lot easier. The capacitors are kind of better. Oh my god, sacrilege. But if you do have to swap out some capacitors, now a lot of the reasons people like these old amps is because they're failing. Because some people like that sound, and if you recap this amp, it would sound better, but not better to every ear, of course. So don't repair. So my philosophy is only repair what needs to get repaired on these amps. Don't modify and repair them just because you can. But back to that point is, if you can get your hands on one, it can probably get fixed up too. So thanks for watching. There's a lot more. There's a bunch more of these videos about small amps. There's a series, if you like this subject matter, there's a series called Tube Talk, where I did a little series just talking about tubes, and that can be interesting as well. And then there's probably 150 other YouTube videos we have here. So like and subscribe and all that good stuff, and we'll see you soon. Thanks for watching.